Hey, welcome to the B2B Solutions Group. We want to talk today about business ownership and getting out of business ownership, how to find the exit ramp from your business, what comes next after that, how to plan for that, how to plan for the exit, how to plan for the life post-exit as well. So we're going to do all of that today, and I look forward to partnering with my fellow Purdue University graduate, Michelle Fritsch. We're rooting for the Boilermakers this week in the tournament, but don't have high hopes of them going quite as far as they did last year to the championship game that was. How many of you can see yourself in this position after you have finished your career and have retired? Like that? Walking the beach? We purposely chose that stock photo because we thought this might appeal to a large number of people. I want to chat with you a little bit about some things that we haven't talked about before in my conversations with you. I want to talk about what the process of selling a business and how to prepare your business to sell. So what we want to do first is I want to talk about what the state of the market is today. It's a great time to sell a business. It is what we call a seller's market. We have a lot more buyers out there than we do good businesses for sale. I put a business up on the market last Thursday evening, and I've got nearly 40 inquiries already. That is what's happening. Good quality businesses will sell quickly. I ask people who are buyers, don't assume you're the only person who is looking at a given business. If you find it to be attractive, it's got good cash flow, good trends associated with it, got good systems in place, don't assume that you're the only one looking at it because there's probably a lot of other folks looking at it. Let's go on to the next slide here and we'll cover a few points. So it's a strong market right now for good solid businesses. Interest rates have cut into a little bit of the financing, but there's plenty of money available. On my way over here today, I've had a phone conversation with a banker who's calling on behalf of his client who's looking to buy one of the businesses that we have, and he was advocating for this buyer's quality and wanted to be able to put his best foot forward as a potential buyer of the business. There's money out there available. We're finding that due diligence, that process where you are investigating a business once you're under contract before you close, it's taking a little longer. Sometimes it's on the financing side that takes longer. Sometimes it's on the legal side. But deals are getting done. Why is it even relevant to say 2020 financials are irrelevant today? And that is because for the last few years, bankers and buyers were always wondering, well, how did the business do during COVID? That's mostly irrelevant these days. We're not even looking at 2020 financials anymore. A lot of whatever came out of that for the good for some companies, for the bad for others, that's behind us now. We don't even worry about that. There's a very strong market for businesses that have cash flow in excess of $500,000. And there are a lot of businesses out there that are doing that. So they're very attractive to folks to get into. We have found that there is a slightly higher degree of expectation for some seller financing. Seller financing is when the seller agrees essentially to carry a note for the purchase of the business. Never is it going to be 100% of the purchase. That is no money down. Sellers, I'll pay that seller over time. Never are we going to see that. But sometimes it's a combination of the bank financing part and some seller financing, or a large down payment in some seller financing. Because of the higher interest rates, we're seeing more inquiries about asking the seller to carry a note for a little while. By the way, are you seeing some of that too in your bank? Yeah, we're seeing some of that. Landlords can be a challenge today. The lease rates have gone up. Landlords are looking for more. I dealt with a business recently that they had come to us, wanted to seek our representation as they need to sell the business. Because of where they're located, happens to be in Charlotte, happens to be in an area that's appreciated over time, their lease was going to go up 1 year from now from $8,000 a month to $29,000 a month.
Oops.
That's a decision-breaking kind of point about, can this business be sold? But that's what's happening. If you're in an area, if you've been leasing and it's appreciating in value, it may be a challenge because that buyer, and more importantly, as I shared with you before, the buyer's banker is going to look at that and take that into consideration about what's the cash flow of this business going to be, not in the past, in the future. Yes, sir, Alan?
Are businesses moving out of Charlotte because of things like that?
No, because this is where the money is to be made. They're not moving out of Charlotte. but it's causing them to sometimes have to give great concern to where they're located and maybe find a different place, maybe moving out a little bit more from where they are. Depends upon how important location is to that given business. Retail businesses, of course, they're all built around where it's convenient for consumers to come to them. If you're in a B2B kind of business, though, it may not be as important. Key here, and what all buyers are looking at is, why is this person wanting to sell their business? Number one reason is retirement. That's what we see at the top of the list. But we also see these other reasons, and many people overlook those. Sometimes it's a health event that's taken place. And Michelle's going to talk a little bit about that from a business perspective for an owner, about taking care of your health and planning for the future. But that often comes up of something's happened either to the owner or a loved one in the owner's family. Could be that the owner's just burned out on the business as well. Maybe they've outgrown the business or their ability to actually manage and grow the business themselves, and they realize someone new could take this business to a higher plane. Sometimes there's money issues, capital constraints, that they can't financially grow it any more than it is, and some people just want to carve back on their risk at that stage of life. I always suggest to business sellers to put yourself in the shoes of the buyer. That'll help you understand what's important for them when you think about, what price should I agree to ask for? What kind of terms should I seek? What kind of expectations should I have of a buyer? A buyer is looking for, they're motivated by either one, they're wanting to buy a job for themselves. Maybe they're burnt out on the corporate life. They've had this entrepreneurial itch for a long time. They don't know how to scratch it, and they want to seek business ownership. Maybe they already have a business. They're looking to acquire something in the same space or a different space as well. Diversifying the portfolio or just seeking a new challenge in their life. But I want to understand from that buyer, why are you doing this? Why are you looking at this? Because it helps me understand how to work with them better. But the seller needs to keep in mind this as well. The buyer wants an opportunity that they want this business to create enough cash flow that it's going to help cover their debt, and our banker's going to make sure before they even agree to write the loan that there's enough cash flow in that business to cover the debt load. But they also want it to be able to provide them with a reasonable standard of living, a reasonable salary in addition to what the business creates, a good return on investment. They're looking for something that has clean financials. We talked about that once before in one of my earlier talks. We see businesses every once in a while where they haven't done a good job of taking care of their finances. They don't have a good bookkeeper. They don't have someone in a good CPA to advise them. I've literally had someone who called me, this was last year, it doesn't happen often. He called me in July and wanted me to help him sell the business. I said, send me over your profit and loss statement and your balance sheet. He says, well, I got this box of receipts and I take it to my accountant at the end of the year. I said, thank you, but I can't help you. And we ended the conversation right there. There are those business owners out there. Their business will never sell with that kind of sloppiness there. Have good, clean financials. Buyers are looking for transparency. They want responsive communications. When they see that they can get answers to their questions quickly, financial reports are readily available because they've worked with somebody to set up a great financial reporting system. Buyers love that. They love that opportunity to be able to get at that information and feel like they can trust it. They want a business that can grow. Businesses that are going downhill, they can sell. They're going to sell for a lot less than a business that's even at the same cash flow level but is growing in its trend. They're looking for an established customer base. They like businesses where there's already a good experienced staff on board, and that staff is likely to stay on board in the transition. I like the idea of an existing lease. The problem with the business I cited a while ago, within a year, that lease increase was going to take place. Well, yeah, so you got the rest of 2025 at the current lease. They want something that's going to be stable for several years. And as I said earlier, the banker's going to be looking for that as well. They want a business that doesn't depend greatly on the owner. Here's some challenges here that come in for many business owners. Many business owners take pride in the fact that they're really involved in the business. All my customers know me. All my vendors know me. Those businesses are difficult to sell because a buyer can quickly get the perception that I don't think I can take the place of that owner. I don't know how easily transferable that is. My counsel to business owners where the business depends on them considerably is think of ways that you can outsource or delegate or create systems that help minimize the business dependence on you as an owner. It makes it more attractive to a potential buyer. And customer concentration. Again, the bankers especially look at this as well. One of the questions I always ask a business owner who's thinking about selling, do you have any customers that account for more than 10% of your revenue? If you do, let's talk about what that means. How many? How big a percentage is it? Because the perception will be for a buyer, again, for their lender, is what if that one customer left? What happens to the business? How much is it going to suffer? We've had businesses that have good amount of concentration I've got a business coming up where it's probably 40% of the revenue is tied to a customer, but it's been regular, it's been steady, and the owner feels like, hey, this is going to easily transfer over to someone. Still, it's going to be a question that's going to come up. We know it's going to be an issue. So those are things to keep in mind.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
I heard a statement yesterday, I thought it was brilliant, that the staff, the employees, are the most appreciable asset of a company. How much are buyers looking for that? Who are the employees? Are they stable? Are they turning over quickly? How well has the owner taken care of those employees and kind of built that loyalty?
So for the question for those who are listening to this on the recording was about how important is it that there's stability in the workforce and that they're staying on board and they don't have a lot of turnover. It's extremely important. What I like to do is when I put together my marketing materials on a business, I'm going to present the list of employees by title, not by name, because we don't want to identify that, what they're paid, what their tenure is, how long have they been with the business along the way. Because yes, an owner wants to know that there's experience, that there's stability, and that those folks are likely to stay over with me if I was to buy the business. Good question. Let's talk about a process. And this is a process that we use, but I think most business sellers will use some process like this. When we're representing a business and taking them on to sell, we're going to spend a lot of time step one. We want to get to know that business. Phone conversations, tour of the business, collecting photos, collecting lots of other information about the business. We have a lot of questions we ask before we agree to take on a business. We've gathered all that information. We've prepared marketing materials. We are going to market. What do I mean when I say that? So when you sell your house, you put that house, maybe with a realtor, you put it on the MLS, or maybe on your own, you put it on Zillow. Either way, you're probably putting pictures, descriptions, the address. You're inviting people to come take a tour. You want the world to know about your house for sale. When it comes to selling a business, it's quite the opposite. I don't want the world to know. I don't want my employees to know. I don't want my customers to know. Because why? What might happen? What's that? Panic. Employees might panic. Customers might panic. They're leaving. They imagine the worst case scenario. They imagine that some two-headed ogre is going to buy this business and they're going to fire all of us day one in order to save money. Or the customers imagine, oh, there's going to be a lot of disruption and maybe we need to find someone else. So either way, we don't want the world to know. So when we go to market, we're typically naming the type of business, the general area where it's located, but we're not providing enough information to identify, oh yeah, XYZ business is for sale. We don't want the world to know those things. Exceptions might be when it's a franchise and there are a number of those franchises in a region. We might say, as I sold one last fall, the Club Pilates location in Charlotte. Well, there are a dozen of them. So we didn't say which one was for sale. And no one was able to guess it that way. So that's when we think the name brand may help in selling it, and there's a lot of other locations, but you don't know which one, we might do it in that case. Step 3, after we've gone to market, we're screening people who are inquiring. We're collecting non-disclosure agreements from them where they pledge to keep confidential any of the information we share with them. We are then going into a period of negotiations. We're saying, okay, it's time to make an offer. You've learned about the business. You may have even met the owner. You may have taken a tour of the business. Time to make an offer or move on. And so we are leading the negotiations. This can be a bit of a challenging period, a little bit of stress, but we already know, working with our sellers, about what they're seeking, what they're wanting to get for the business, and certainly the owners are involved in those negotiations. We'll spend a little more time on the step 4, due diligence, because this can be the most stressful time for a business owner. Michelle and I were talking a little bit ago about the stress of selling a business, of exiting the business. Here, there's a lot that's gone into before step 1. The owner's been thinking about it a while. Something's occurred, I'm thinking about retirement, maybe I'm ill, maybe I'm just ready to move on, whatever the case may be. So a lot of thought went into this. Then we're going through this. This can go rather quickly. This can be a slog, and this can be very stressful. And I advise folks about that because in due diligence, this is like a doctor exam of your business. They're going to ask all kinds of questions. They're going to seek all kinds of financial reports. Their lender is going to seek a lot of information as well on the business. There's going to be a lot of questions. There's going to be a lot of disruption, and it all has to be done in a certain amount of time. One of the things we try to do to mitigate that, since we've gone through this so many times, we know what are the typical questions asked in this stage. Let's gather that information up here. So we try to gather that as much as we can up front when we have a little more time to do it right, and then it's not as stressful down here. So in due diligence, there's the exam of the financials. There's also the lawyers for the respective parties are preparing legal documents. There is, if there's financing involved, the bank is underwriting the loan and offering the commitment to the buyer for financing the deal. A lot of things happening. Our role in that is kind of like the old ringmaster in the Barnum and Bailey circus, working with the accountants, the attorneys, the bankers, the landlords, sometimes the financial advisors, various different parties in to help everyone stay on track to keep the business transaction moving towards the final, which would be the closing. And that's when we celebrate, and that's when we then, shortly thereafter, get to take that picture at the beach. Let's roll on, please. A little bit on the some of the nitty-gritties. Won't go through all of this. We usually the buyer is writing, or the buyer's attorney is writing the offer. In real estate, there's a standard form. There isn't a standard form for that in the business side. We can provide a template to people if they want. So buyer's attorney is typically writing it. Usually 30 to 45-day due diligence period. It's brief. That's why it can be stressful. There's a lot of things requested of a business owner during that time period. Same period for getting a finance commitment from a lender. We do ask of folks that a buyer's going to have to put some money down up front. We just want them to have some commitment up front, but it is refundable should they back out during the due diligence period. And it's a good idea to require confidentiality. We don't want buyers talking with employees. Employees are important, but we don't want them talking to employees. Again, we don't want them to be tipped off. We don't want the buyers talking with the customers either during this due diligence period. Let's roll on. Financing options. This is where you may want to take a brownie break if it gets too boring. Sometimes it's an all-cash deal. Rarely does that happen. Usually there's some sort of cash down payment plus SBA financing. We're typically talking about small businesses under, say, 20 million in revenue. That we're typically seeing that. So some SBA financing could be just exclusively the SBA. Well, you even know you're going to have a 10% down payment typically. A little bit of overview. You can put as little as 10 to 25% down to buy a business. So you could buy a business that's generating, say, $300,000 a year in cash flow to the owner. You could buy that business more or less for $1 million. And you could only have to put down, say, $100,000 in a down payment and finance it with an SBA loan. So the SBA process, it's important. It helps lubricate the wheels there for transactions to happen, for business expansion to happen as well. So we love SBA loans, but hey, they can take a while to get done because there's something funny about that. The bankers want to get repaid for their loan. So they're going to look at these things closely. So 10 to 25% down, fixed or variable rates at prime plus up to 2.75%. That's going to put us at what? A little over 9.5%, 10% now? Yeah, something around 10. Question, Alan?
Yeah, is the new administration, any new regulations or deregulation affected the Small Business Association lending at all?
Not quite yet, but there's been some little scares along the way. The question had to do with without getting political, with the new administration, have there been some threats to SBA or disruption there? When the initial freeze on federal spending happened a few weeks ago, and it was just kind of like general description, our contact said, wait a minute, time out, let's wait, see what happens. There was like 24 hours where we weren't sure if some things were going to go forward or not. Did you find that also? Yep. Yes. And then, okay, cleared up, okay, we're all good to go. Who knows going forward? Yeah. Who goes in going forward, we'll see. Things could get disrupted again. Thing is about SBA, it's a great way to finance the purchase of a business. They're going to want to take a life insurance policy out on you as a buyer. Again, to help guarantee that they're going to get repaid one way or the other. Whether you exit the business or whether you exit this world, they want to get repaid. They're going to want a personal guarantee. They're going to take out a lien on your house also to buy that business. And so that's where some people get scared off from it. That's okay. You can pay off that loan in 10-year period or up to 25 years if there's real estate involved. So it's a great way to finance a business. We rarely see this, but sometimes people use their 401k or qualified money to purchase a business too. Paul.
Before you go to the next slide, on the second bullet point, it shows seller financing plus seller. How is the seller financing?
So sometimes the bank will say, yeah, we can finance this agreed purchase price up to X dollars. Say my example, I'll go, it's $1 million purchase. Maybe the bank says we can finance up to $800,000, but the remaining $200,000, we want that seller to carry a note. It's the way they have skin in the game. They have an interest in that buyer's continued success, but also we as a bank feel more comfortable in the risk that we're assuming. Fair way to summarize that?
Fair way.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, quick bullet points here. Preparing your business to sell. 1, reduce your role. We already talked about that. So things that you can do so that the business does not depend on you. 2, maintain updated financial reports. Don't be waiting till the end of the year to get things to your bookkeeper or accountant. To have that available at any point in time. Plus, it's good business practice to be able to know at any one point, how is my business doing compared to last year, compared to a budget, trends in the business. Reduce the financial noise. What do I mean by that? Some owners I've heard of will put some personal expenses through their business. No one here does that? No. I know, but some will do that. And to some extent of that, we can say, okay, you can document that. We can count that towards calculating what your true business cash flow is. We call it seller discretionary earnings. It's money that you take at your discretion. Right? We can still count that. But every once in a while, we see some crazy stuff coming through, and we see a lot of little stuff that just kind of add up. $100 here, $500 there, $1,000 here. The more you do of that, the less confident a buyer has in your trustworthiness and in the business credibility. Just being honest with you. My suggestion to business owners, if they come to me and they're telling me, I'm a year or more away from wanting to sell, my advice is, in that last year, maximize your profits, even if it means you pay more in taxes. So if you do the math, you find this. For every dollar I save for every dollar that I reduce my taxable income, I'm saving maybe 30 cents in taxes. Just a rough idea there. But that dollar is costing me $3 in the sale of the business, eventually. If you say you get about a 3 times multiple on something, think about it that way. Optimize your business profitability. Clean up this noise. Plus the bankers, it drives them nuts too when they see a lot of noise in there and they start wondering if this is something even really worth doing. Can I trust these people? Modernize your systems. Use up-to-date customer relationship management tools and other tools in your business. Use a newer version of QuickBooks, for gosh sakes. Okay? Yeah, do those things. Use the updated systems. It gives greater confidence to a buyer also. Make sure you're in compliance with HR policies and practices. We have people in our group who can help you with that. With good financial reporting practices. Make sure you're in compliance with local environmental regulations and other related things. Know the value of your business. Work with somebody who can help you get an idea. What is my business really worth? What do I want to get out of it when I eventually sell it? So then you can develop a plan to get there in the future. Let's roll. So that's a little bit about who I am. We want to do a little bit of a segue here. See if there's any questions first. Any questions you have of me? Yes.
Question.
Al.
So that last year, potentially, this goes against every grain of tax mitigation that I want for my clients. Maybe it's not the best idea to maximize profit share, maximize salary deferral for that last year to show more profit.
Yeah, I appreciate that question about deferring profit sharing or deferring qualified plan distribution. No, you do those. Those are easy add backs. Those are easy to explain. Do those things. I'm talking about the personal things. Yeah, I put my kid through summer camp and I expensed that through the business. Really? You did that? Why did you do that? Yeah. Funding the boat. Yeah. All of those kind of things. Those are the things that are less defensible and they just create noise for the buyer to have to wade through and sort through. Good question. Paul?
I know there's a lot of variability in this, but how long does a business stay on the market before we start getting traction and serious?
How long does a business on the market before we can get good buyers there? I advise my clients it takes an average of about 9 months to sell a business. You're looking at 2.5 months alone for the SBA financing once you are under contract. But about 9 months to close on the sale of a business. It depends upon how reasonable you were in pricing it. It depends upon the trends in your business. The business I just put on the market Thursday night, like I said, nearly 40 inquiries already. That's a very strong response. Some other businesses, we may get 4 in the first week, but 40 is strong. It's got good financials. It's got a long track record, a good reputation. So it's got a lot of things going for it. So the better the business quality overall, the faster it will sell as long as we're reasonable in what we're asking. Good. Any question? Michelle?
I have a question about the, you mentioned for 1 year. How far back does a buyer look at the financials? Is it just the last
We're
year?
typically looking at 3 years. We'll get a buyer every once in a while, and once I had a banker who wanted to look 10 years back because it was a business that was subject to economic cycles. And in this case, the banker wanted to look back a number of years. How did they do in the last downturn? We argued that that was rather irrelevant because that had been long in the past. But typically 3 years is what the bankers and the buyers look for. A year or so ago, we were looking back more than 3 years because we wanted to see what did it do before COVID, because that was such a disruptor and changed everything for so many businesses. But typically 3 years with more weight, more consideration to what have you done lately, the most recent year.
Then I have a couple people questions. So I've talked to valuation people, right? The ones that determine the value of the company. And some of them just want papers. You know, Nikki sent me all the bookkeeping for the last however or whatever, and they make a decision. And others want to do more like you talked about, go into the company, meet the people,
Right.
see the people, how stable are the people, and they come up with very different numbers. So
Yeah.
from your standpoint, what is the right way to determine value as you go out to the market?
Well, so the question is how in valuing a business then, how is it important to do a paper review, looking at the financial statements versus going in depth? Ideally, it's both. Sometimes if someone's wanting to get a general value, I'm just looking for an opinion. What's the range? Hey, I can do that by just looking at the tax returns, the profit and loss statements. I can give them that. If we're wanting to get a better idea of, I'm thinking about selling here soon, I want to come in and see things. I want to see the status of the equipment that may be used. I'm not going to come in and talk with employees, though, or any of that, because, again, we don't want, when I go into a business during daytime hours or regular working hours, I'm the insurance agent, and no one wants to talk with me. No one asks questions. So there's some combination there, but usually it's only when we're talking about we're imminently going to be selling the business will we want to go in, do the tour and so on.
That makes sense. But what about maybe 2 or 3 or 4 years before the sale, really bolstering the people?
Sure, preparing your people to
Not
prepare your-
necessarily for sale, because you don't want them to know that that's coming,
Right.
but just to make the strongest workforce and culture that you possibly can. How much does that impact value of the business?
Well, how much does it impact value to invest in your people? One, having long tenured folks who know what they're doing and are good at what they're doing, that's an asset. If investing in your people means raising your salaries considerably, which is going to reduce your bottom line, that could be negative. But if you're doing that because it's going to build my profitability in the long run through greater revenue growth, then it's probably a good thing. There's some mix in there for finance. Yeah. We're talking about how you prepare your business to sell and then how you sell a business. But then what comes next? Because I showed you the picture of the couple on the beach, and that looks pretty carefree, and like, why do I have to even worry about it? What comes next? That is what comes next. But you may have many years ahead of you at that point, quite a few years possibly. And how do you want to live those years? A lot of people think I'm going to travel. Last time I did this kind of conversation, I asked you guys what you want to do, and travel was the number one thing everyone raised their hand about. But there's more to life than travel, and you can't do it all the time either, unless you're really wealthy in selling the business. But you want to go into it with some kind of purpose and plan in order to be able to have a good focus and a reason to be getting up every day and have something to do and look forward to. Michelle and her team have put together a process that will help enable you to do that. I went through it myself in the last few months because I wanted to be able to see what I might be able to refer to my clients. And indeed, I've been able to refer her to someone because of that, because I found it was a great experience of being able to create a very specific plan about what's important for you and how you want to spend your time in that next stage of life. So I want to bring up my partner and fellow Boilermaker, Michelle Fritsch.
Thank you, sir. Awesome. So this is the next question. And a lot of people think that when you retire, sell your business, move on, transition, that it's all about, well, what do I want to do? How do I want to spend my time? And that often becomes, well, how will I stay busy? And that has a lot to do with hobbies and family, and all of that is wonderful. But I have found, through being in healthcare for a really long time, that the people that really thrive, the people that I've been able to care for in their 80s and 90s and 100s who are still going strong, they didn't just stay busy over all of their years. There was a really big difference in their life and kind of how and why they woke up every morning and how they used the time available to them. So before I dive into that too much, I am finding that right now, people nearing retirement, it's become like a 4-letter word. People don't want that word. They don't want to do that thing. So I've heard words like preferment, rewriting, and what was the other one that I recently heard? So do anybody have a word that you would, I'm never going to retire. I hear that a lot. I'm never going to retire. So what are you going to do? What do you call that next phase of life if and when you're not doing your current occupation? Any other fun words out there?
Second half.
Second half, fourth quarter.
No, second half sounds like I got more running.
More time. Fourth quarter, that's a good point. We called it,
Clock is ticking.
we've called it bold act 3, which would mean the last third. Yeah, nobody wants that whole concept of last.
Giving back chapter.
Oh, I like that, the giving back chapter.
Changing careers again.
Sort of. And I've had people tell me, well, I don't want another job, I'm done. But purpose isn't necessarily a job, yeah. So what I found, again, caring for a lot of people, I'm going to take that back, not a lot. A few select, really engaged people that lived into those old age, still going strong. And a whole lot of people that might have lived a period of time, but not in good health. There was a big difference. And at first, being a healthcare professional, I was convinced it's what they're eating and how they're moving their body. And that's part of it. It is. But there was something more. And maybe I am slow to pick up on important things, but finally realized that purpose was that real differentiator. So I want to talk for a minute about the difference. And I want to ask, be very, very honest with me, who thinks, she's making this up, there is no difference? No, nobody's going to say that. Cool. All right. So staying busy and purpose. We're going to start with busy. Next slide, please. It sounds great at first. And most people, at the day that they have their retirement party or their whatever on Friday, and then they begin this new chapter on Monday, it is wonderful to be able to sleep in for as long as you want to take your time eating breakfast and not be ready to jog out the door, to never put your clothes on the whole day. You just stay in your jammies all day long because you don't need to be anywhere. It is wonderful to be able to just relax and go see family, go to places you've always wanted to be. So for most people, that, I am finally free, lasts for about 6 months. And then a very large percentage of people are back to some sort of employment within a year because busy just doesn't do it. There are also people who've been retired for a couple of decades and they've fallen into a routine. You get up, you read the morning paper over a cup of coffee, you make breakfast and you make that last as long as possible, then you eat breakfast, then you do maybe some sort of puzzle, then you might run the vacuum, and then you might run to the grocery store, and then you make lunch, and you make that last as long as possible, and you eat lunch, and the whole day is sort of regimented into tasks. And that can happen over years and years and years and years. And that works for a lot of people. But when you think about what life could be and quality of life and how much you have to give to the world that's not being used because it's all being used up, running the vacuum and cooking meals, it could be different. So I find over time that busy becomes focused on self. What do I want to do? How do I want to spend my time? What do I want my day to look like? And over a period of time that becomes kind of exhausting, either monotonous or exhausting, not fulfilling. I have yet to speak to someone who's been in that same routine for years and years and years who feels like they're just getting a lot out of life. Okay, so what's the difference with purpose? Time for the pretty picture. Thank you. Purpose is very outward focused. And it is, what can I do to stay engaged in the world, stay engaged in life, and do something that has meaning to other people? Doesn't have to be a full-time job, and maybe it's something you only touch for 30 minutes on Saturday, but it's something that's using your unique skill set, your perspective about things that you've accumulated over time, because you've lived a life and you've done the things that you've done, and it is your passions. What do you like? What do you like to do? And then what's going on in the world that breaks your heart? That you're like, somebody needs to do something about that. When you put all of that together, that kind of becomes someone's new purpose. And I've talked to a lot of people who are like, okay, I'm ready for purpose. Give me one. Hand me something. I'm going to go to the store. I'm going to buy the first purpose that I find. It's not that easy. It is so personal. And so sometimes it's a process to figure out for an individual, well, where am I still engaged in the world? But when somebody finds it and they find that way to impact others, it's almost like a boomerang effect. That is what brings back the personal fulfillment. Those are the people that we see in their 80s, 90s, and 100s who are still going strong. So give me examples. Who have you known in your lifetime who lived a really long time still living out purpose up until the very, very end? It can be famous people. It can be personal relationships.
I had a
grandmother that lived to 94. And
Uh-huh.
she was, up until maybe 2 years before that, she was very engaged in her community and people, and she was in her 90s going to visit people in nursing homes in their 70s and 80s, and
The youngsters.
Yeah.
She was out taking care of the youngsters. I love that.
She stayed very involved with groups of people and fed into them and encouraged them, and she's very much a people person.
So Charlotte's telling us about her grandmother lived to 94, and she was engaged in her community, visiting people in nursing homes or people that were homesick, and she was giving of herself at the age of 94.
I don't know
I know
anyone
you don't.
personally, but say even most recently, like Jimmy Carter.
I was just
Lived to
thinking
100.
about him. Yes,
You know,
Jimmy
had that
Carter.
Purpose, had that farm, had his community service projects, and he was still with it all the way.
He was still with it. And Jimmy Carter, he was still teaching Sunday school up until right before he passed. So yeah, he was giving, and all sorts. And talk about a life of service up until that point. I may have shared some of these stories with you all before, but what my favorite one so far that I think is such the big leap from where this person was as a professional and where he found purpose and joy is a gentleman that was an airline executive. So not a pilot, but an executive for one of the major airlines. And his family was ready for him to be around more and to retire. And he kind of went through the process. And what he found, partly through a family story that he knew about, was that when a child is born very early, the little neonates, they need skin time in order to continue to develop their neurologic system. And so he goes in and takes his shirt off and holds these tiny little 1-grammers, these tiny little babies, and helps them to continue to develop. And he knows in doing that, not only is he giving that infant a chance for a more robust life, because their brain is going to be more functional, all of those parts that are still developing are going to develop more accurately. But he knew that those parents probably have other children, maybe. They've got jobs that they're trying to hold down. They're trying to manage life. And now they know that neonate's in good hands and somebody is doing what needs to be done to continue the nurturing of their child. So that one was big, far switch from his career to his purpose. There are other people that never go very far. So engineers that kind of get into something to do with the environment and new technologies. Still using that engineer brain, but on something that in the world they feel needs to move forward faster or it needs more support. So they use their engineering knowledge in order to facilitate that a little bit more. Other examples. Somebody who had a manager of a multi-site company who, not necessarily a big national franchise, but a local franchise, I guess. And he oversaw all of that. And what he found was that he really wanted to get more involved in his church. At one point early in his life, like back in college, he had thought about being a pastor, and he did not do that. So he saw his retirement time as a time not to become a full pastor, but to get some additional credentials where he could play a bigger role in the church. And at the same time, there's a lawyer in Baltimore. I used to live in Baltimore. He sent me another email yesterday. He contacts me regularly. He's like, yeah, I don't need you yet. Just want to update you. I'm doing just fine. I'm going to continue in my law practice. I don't need you yet. But he's saying it much more frequently now. So I think maybe he's thinking about it. And his unique situation is he is first half of his 70s, and his wife is in her mid-50s, and she is a networker extraordinaire. So she is out and about constantly, and he is keeping up, but he's also realizing that he has reached a point where he wants to do some other things. And so they're navigating that, both as a couple and him as an individual. Very physically fit, he's go all the time, but maybe some of the rest of the planning, the personal planning, who he wants to be able to impact and how he wants to have impact beyond his law profession is still being developed. And not surprising, I find that people that have had the most difficult road to their credentials have the hardest time letting go. So people that have doctorates or medical practices or legal practices where they've had to not only spend years in training, but then continuing education throughout to maintain those credentials, it's hard to let go of that. Those are the ones that kind of struggle the most. They do the best when they can figure out, okay, I've got all this skill set, all these things I'm great at, all these things I haven't had time to do. Now, how do I want to use myself in a new way?
You know lawyers like that. I know some great nonprofits that are always looking for lawyers on their boards and trying to find those purposes.
That's a great point. Lawyers on the board. Every nonprofit probably needs a good lawyer. And that would be a way for them to continue to give. I love that. We're going to switch gears a little bit. Any questions about busy versus purpose and why it's a big deal? Okay. So this kind of goes back a little bit to talking about preparing people for the sale of a company, preparing the workforce to be as strong and stable as possible, preparing all of us, our loved ones, for the changing times that we are in. You know, I feel like you can always say that, but you can really say that right now. So when people don't have a really great process for managing stress or fears, they're worried about things, the worriers in this world. When they don't have a good process, that has a big impact on health. Click, please. So I'm going to make you click a lot on this one. So stress and fear impacts your health, and here are some of the ways. One that you might notice, because some of the stuff's internal, so that one of the external things is a shorter fuse. Let's be honest, especially since COVID, that seems to be the demarcation for a lot of people. Since the world, a lot of things changed with COVID, do you find that you get irritated more easily? Some examples, somebody cuts you off in traffic. Did you used to be like, oh, you obviously need to be somewhere quickly, you know, carry on. And now you're like, how dare you cut me off? A little bit more easily? Anybody get annoyed with the people around them a little more quickly than they did before? Anybody find that you get upset with yourself more easily and more quickly? You're harder on yourself than maybe you were before? Yeah. Another one, has anyone experienced disruptions in sleep? I'm finding that that's sort of a global phenomenon right now. And it can go either direction or both. It can be that you are so much going on in your head that you have trouble falling asleep or staying asleep. You wake up at some point in the night and boy, it just takes off. The to-do list, the oh my gosh, I forgot to do that, I've got to remember this for tomorrow kind of thing, making it hard to go back to sleep. Or there are some people who are like, I just don't want to even participate in the world anymore, and they find it really hard to not sleep. So they're sleeping extra hours, extra deeply, just sort of shutting down more often. So that can go either way. Has anyone experienced stress eating and drinking? I would, speaking of, I think it would be interesting if we could kind of measure, especially in the United States, average weight since 2020. Because, you know, we got kind of shut up for a long time, and now it just feels like it's continued stress. And that does tend to eat, not only stress eating and drinking, but to go to a dark place for a minute, any sort of habitual thing that spurs some dopamine and brings you some relief. So that could be pornography, that could be gambling, that could be any sort of gaming, any sort of anything that it just consumes you and kind of helps you shut down from everything else. And there's been a lot of substance and other activity overuse and misuse in a lot of people's lives, especially in the last few years. And then poor coping skills. Things overwhelm you more quickly, or you're like, I just can't deal with that. I gotta be honest, for me, if you handed me one of those sales agreements, I'd be like, oh, it's gonna take me a while to be mentally prepared to read that thing, right? It's harder to read really long, complex documents. For me anyway, compared to I feel like what it was before. It's just the brain doesn't want to stop and focus for that long. So some things happening internally that you're not going to see, and unfortunately because of that, sometimes we ignore them and let them go far too long until they rear their ugly heads in ways that we can't prevent. So inflammation in the body, stress triggers an inflammatory process all throughout our body. Everything from your head to your toes, all of your organs, all of your internal systems. Blood pressure increases. That might happen gradually, you know. Yeah, my blood pressure was great. Oh, my blood pressure's up, you know, just a little bit, it's fine. And then my blood pressure's kind of right at the limit, but I'll get it down. Well, my blood pressure's a little bit over the limit, but I've got a plan. I'll get it down. Well, my blood pressure's quite a bit over the limit, but I'm working on it. I know this is being recorded. Don't show my husband. He went through that for a while, and I finally, thankfully, his primary care doctor was a friend of mine, and I'm like, stop letting him get away with this. We've got to take action, because high blood pressure that's not dealt with over time does have long-lasting effects. Increases the risk of the strokes and the heart attacks and the clotting and some of the other things that can really make a difference, and you can't bounce back from some of those things. Another one, especially with the stress eating and drinking, click please, is blood sugar. As we put on a little weight, as we get a little more careless with what we eat and how we eat, as we all go back for seconds and thirds on those brownies, our blood sugar can go up. And we know with that it increases risk of diabetes, or if someone already has diabetes, it's going to increase their risk of not controlling it well. And then that's part of something that you've probably heard of called the metabolic syndrome, where you've got the diabetes, the high blood pressure, the heart disease that kind of goes with it, the increased cholesterol, and then the increased risk of heart attacks and such. So those little things that when we let them just sort of eke up a little bit more and more and more can really add up over time. Well, one of the things that happens when someone is selling a business or nearing retirement, they tend to get head down. I've got to get this done. I've got to get all these numbers in place, all of these tasks in place. I've got to finish my bucket list of goals within my place of employment. I've got to do this, I've got to do this. When that happens, they tend to move less, kind of at their desk more, worry more, sleep less, and grab junk to eat instead of getting up and going and having a good meal. And they tend to have more social isolation during that time as well, because they're just trying to get all of those tasks done, not realizing that all of this is accumulating while they're ignoring it. And then it gets to the really bad stuff. Next click. A weakened immune system overall. Have you found that when you're at your most stressed, you're more likely to get a cold or COVID or the flu or whatever's going around that particular week, or all of it together, as some people have done recently? So when you allow yourself to get overstressed and you're not managing it, your immune system is suppressed. Any germ you come across is going to capture you. And then the scariest one of all is now the data has really been coming in that stress that's not managed over time greatly increases risk of Alzheimer's and of various kinds of cancers. The most recent study I saw was linking breast cancer, but they're finding it definitely with colon cancer, pancreatic cancer, some other cancers as well. So we didn't know this, right? You don't know what you don't know. Humanity didn't have all of these things tying all of this together so that we could make good proactive decisions, but we can't claim that anymore. Now we know, now there's a lot of data. And so it all comes back to, for us as individuals, for our families, if you've got little ones, that's the time to start good stress management skills, so they don't start accumulating all of this. And for people that are nearing the sale of a business, for people that, for their employees, you don't want to do things right at the last second where it trips somebody's trigger that something's about to change. But if businesses are taking care of their employees and teaching them some of these techniques long before that day, in addition to really increasing the value and the culture and what the business is all about, kind of building that loyalty, then that makes the sale of the business, the value greater, and the sale of the business better as well. So, I'm the proponent of the wellness portfolio. As people are doing their due diligence, preparing for the sale with all of the finances, with all of the legal matters, there's a due diligence around health that is important as well. And I have found over my career that most people wait until the bad thing happens and then like, oh yeah, I've been meaning to do that. Okay, help me get healthy. We can help at that point, but we can't turn it all around. So the earlier we can be proactive, the better. So it's about your health, knowing your risks and taking action on those, knowing your purpose, knowing how you're going to stay mentally sharp after you retire, who's going to be your people, because you're not going to, sadly, be coming in networking with us anymore. So all of those things planned ahead of time really make that beautiful, thriving future. So now, that's it. Any questions for us? Thank you. So putting it all together, questions, ideas, ways to apply it that feel different.
How do you work with people? Do you work individuals? Do you work with companies?
Good question. So the Propel process, we've put it all online, sort of a do-it-yourself, where people can go on and the information is in 3-minute snippets. And so you can sit there, you get a little bit every month, and you could spend 3 minutes a day, or you could sit down once a month for an hour or so and go through it. What I'm finding is a lot of people start that way and they don't keep themselves going, and so then they want to work one-on-one. So we work one-on-one either a lot of times via Zoom or in person. And then if somebody really wants, I'm retiring next week, I need it all, we do private retreats where we'll get together and we'll just kind of download it and practice it, put it all into action over a few days. So options. Thank you for asking that.
So real quick, I'm going through your portfolio here. You didn't really talk about caregiver resources. Is that something that you help provide?
Yes.
Connect people with?
We do, because what we're finding is anybody over, I just saw the statistic, anybody currently over the age of 71, I think, there's almost 100% guarantee that you are either going to be or have a caregiver. And I think that number is just going to keep going down because either when your partner, one of your children, a parent, if they're still living, you're going to end up in a caregiver role. And then chances are at some point we might need a caregiver in our own life. So we prepare for all of those. Who do you call? What kind of resources are out there? What do you need to look for in your community? And then a piece of it is, what do you want? How do you want to be cared for? Do you want somebody who, an example, a woman who at a fairly young age, in the birth of her 5th child, she had an aneurysm and she became paralyzed from the waist down. And so she was now living life in a paralyzed state, which means she did need a caregiver pretty much all of the time. And along with her paralysis, she had some GI issues, mostly because she couldn't get up and move. And she had a caregiver who loved to cook super spicy food. Well, it tasted really good, but it did not do good things for her. And of all the simple things, they couldn't find a caregiver that could cook foods that she could digest well. So a lot of personal things. What do you need in the forms of caregivers? How do you look for that and find that?
I have a question, maybe.
Yes.
So I found that I'm spending less and less time with my doctor. Because once we get in, doesn't even look me in the eyes.
Oh, yes.
So over the last few years, I've been thinking of, well, maybe go to one of these wellness practices or function, whatever the term is. There's a bunch of different terms.
There are.
Is that what this is?
Not completely. It's a great question. So it started with not getting as much time with your doctor, or the kind of emphasis, feeling like it's being complete.
Not the symptoms.
Prevent over treat. Yes, we do a lot of that. And then you were talking about there are a lot of different places out there of integrative medicine, functional medicine.
So what's real, what's not,
How do you know if it's legit, if it's going to provide you with good value? That is difficult. That is difficult because a lot of those things are not regulated in the same way. But I'm a big fan of mix and match. So have your primary care doctor, have a primary care doctor who's open to you mixing and matching. And then as you try other things, make sure your doctor knows about it. And anything your doctor does, make sure your integrated practitioner knows about it. An example, if you watch any sports, anything right now, you're going to see commercials for hymns. And these opportunities to have private consultation with a doctor to deal with any sort of emotional health, erectile dysfunction, low testosterone, anything you want. They will provide you with discrete prescriptions. The problem with that is then your healthcare team doesn't know about it. And that leads to all sorts of issues with misdiagnosis, with medical either drug-drug or drug-disease interactions that cause problems.
there's no data for any of that either, correct?
Some of it there is, but it's got to be used appropriately. Like even like Viagra or Cialis, if you're using a nitrate, it's not safe. Well, a doctor over the phone asking you questions is probably not going to catch the fact that you've got heart disease and you're on a nitrate and this could kill you. You know, so I feel like this privatization of parts of healthcare are making it more and more difficult for people to get truly accurate, safe care.
What you just said about the drug-drug interaction, isn't that kind of another advantage of finding a good pharmacy instead of, and not necessarily the chains, because you don't hardly ever see
They're
them.
moving a mile a minute, yeah.
In finding a good local pharmacy that you have an interaction with the pharmacy, because they're the ones that are, pharmacists, they're the ones that are typically much better at drug-drug interactions.
I did not pay you to ask that question, but that was a beautiful question. So asking about having a pharmacist who will actually pay attention to you and really look at the whole picture. Yes, that is going to be one of your, that is kind of your safety net or the gateway to make sure that everything is working together, because you've got specialists, you've got integrated practitioners, you've got holistic practitioners, you've got all the stuff that you choose to buy yourself as you're walking down the aisle. You want to make sure that that person knows all of it, even your supplements, your vitamins, your everything, because it can all interact. So that was a great question. Thank you all.